This is The Weekly Set, an official podcast of TheTotalScreen.com.
I wish I was the monster you think I am.
You have come here to beseech me?
Can't ask for your soul.
Madness can be a medicine for the modern world.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Weekly Set, the official podcast of The Total Screen. I am your host. My name is Tyson, and joining me today, as always, is my partner in crime here at The Total Screen, William Rohrig.
Hello.
So today we are recording episode 260 of our podcast. We are going to be talking about What We Do in the Shadows Season 2. So, first off, right off the bat, Will, how do you rate Season 2 compared to Season 1? Was it an improvement? Is it pretty much the same? How do you feel?
Why are you making me do this? It's been such a long time since I watched Season 1. I don't know if I could properly do it, but let me just say Season 1 is like, I don't know, you're backing me into a corner here. Season 1 was like a 9 out of 10, and I guess this would be like an 8 out of 10. But I mean, I don't know. I enjoyed both pretty equally. I'd say the quality has been consistent.
I think the highs of Season 1 took a while to come in. You know, it took a while before we got those really high moments in Season 1. Season 2, Season 1 left off on a really high, like a really great episode. So when Season 2 started, I was kind of a little bummed about it. Like, it wasn't that it was bad, it's just like it wasn't as clever, you know? But when I look back on it now, I think that's just because I'm comparing basically the beginning of Season 2 to like the end of Season 1. So Season 1 at its best versus like Season 2 as it's finding its feet, you know?
I mean, I don't know. Like, I thought the first episode was hilarious.
It was good, but I mean, you have to remember that the Season 1 finale was the one with all the vampire cameos.
Yeah, I know.
So that was like a really high episode.
That's not a typical episode. So it's like a little unfair.
Exactly. That's what I've come to kind of think about now that I've thought back on it, you know?
Right.
I thought the first episode was pretty good. Second episode was pretty good. Third episode was starting to kind of, you know, drop on me a little bit. And then it started kind of picking up on the next episode. And then from there, it just started really running. So I started really getting into it kind of in the middle of the season for this one. But overall, it's really good. I think if I rate both seasons, I'd probably say they're about the same because Season 1 had that fantastic ending, but there's some episodes towards the middle of Season 2 that I think are on like the same par.
Definitely.
So yeah, I'm kind of, I'm really excited. I don't think Season 2 ended as strong as Season 1 did, but I think that the middle episodes were much stronger.
Season 2 had a pretty spectacular ending, though.
I don't know. I might disagree on that. We're gonna work through our way through the episodes. We'll get to that one. I might disagree a little bit on that one, but let's kind of work our way through. So normally we kind of go over an overview of the whole season when we talk about a show, but as Will and I were talking about before we started recording this one, it's just too many of the episodes are kind of standalone, and it wouldn't really make sense to kind of do it that way. So we're just gonna kind of run through each episode, but do it as quickly as we can, you know, so we can kind of keep everything moving on.
We're gonna speed run it.
We're gonna speed run these episodes. So
it's okay because like the format of the show is it's really light and breezy. So there's no there's no real drama, or when drama happens, it's not dwelled on. There's relationships. Mm-hmm. If the relationships between the characters carry on between episodes, so if there is a through line, it's like the relationships and how they interact and where they are at relationship wise does not change. It, and you know, it evolves throughout the season. We see this with the season, like, yeah, there's self-contained episodes, but like stuff like Nandor and Guillermo's relationship is really explored this season. You know, it's kind of, stretched to almost to its breaking point.
Yeah.
You know, and there's several moments in the season where you see that relationship gets strained, you know, throughout the season. And and our thing is they develop, Guillermo more. We come to find out.
You gotta get that Spanish pronunciation, man. It's Guillermo.
Yeah, okay. Guillermo. We find out that Guillermo is really adept at killing vampires pretty early
this is towards
in
the
the
end
season.
we found this kind of at the end of season 1, when he found out he was like a Van Helsing descendant or something.
Right, okay. But this is explored a lot further in this season.
Yes. So let's start with the first episode. First episode is Resurrection. And this episode begins, we see, as you're talking about with Guillermo, he's basically been secretly, unbeknownst to his masters, has been like slaying just a slew of vampires that have been coming to kill our 4 main vampires, because the 4 main vampires basically have a death sentence on them from last season. They were supposed to have been killed last season, for the death of the master that Guillermo accidentally killed.
Yeah. The death of the master. They were supposed to be killed. Of course, Guillermo and Colin Robinson rescued them, and they escaped.
They seemingly forgot all about the problems with it, as Guillermo's been like secretly killing vampires that have been coming to kill them.
Yes, they have apparently have not been worried about the Vampiric Council ever since.
Yeah, it's kind of hilarious in the way they just completely ignore like the threat.
Yeah,
it's like, oh yeah, we got that go. I guess that's over. Like,
yeah, exactly. You could almost say, because of the episodic nature of the show, that it's almost like a meta joke on the episodic nature. Like, since the episode ended, like that whole storyline that whole storyline is ended, so they're not concerned about it.
Yeah, it's all back to stasis.
Yeah.
Everything goes back to the way it was. But yeah, that's kind of like Guillermo's story in the first episode, is he's dealing with that. At the same time as he's dealing with that, he's also got Laszlo and Nadia have a familiar now. So Guillermo is he's kind of acts as familiar to all of them, but he is actually Nandor's familiar.
Yeah, he's Nandor's familiar. We know, like, he answers to Nandor. And so Laszlo and Nadia have a familiar, but they reveal, like, this isn't their first familiar. They've been going through, like, a string of familiars.
Well, we've seen some of them, like the witch's hat episode in the first season. They had one of their familiars died.
You mean the cursed hat?
Yeah, the cursed hat, like in the first season, not the episode in the second season that dealt with.
No, I know, but I'm trying to remember.
There was one they had a familiar that just died. Like they talked about the familiar, they talked about the cursed hat, and then the familiar like almost immediately died.
Okay, I don't remember that part, but
yeah, like you never got to know the familiar. You just saw them and then they died. That was it.
Okay. So Laszlo and Nadia have been trying to have their own familiar, and the reason they don't have a familiar normally, we find out, is because they keep dying on them.
Yeah. Which I think might be attributed to the hat, the witch hat.
Yeah, it might be. Yeah, it might be like the hat for all of them, but that's not confirmed. But we just know that they're not successful at that. But they got a new guy, Topher, who's apparently doing very well. You know,
except he's not doing anything. Guillermo's basically doing his job for him.
Yeah, Guillermo's doing his job for him. The problem is that Laszlo and Nadia are kind of idiots, so like they don't notice this. I don't even know if they care too much, or if they just have him around to have him around. Mm-hmm. Like, that's just like, especially like Laszlo, that's his personality. He's like carefree, you know?
Yeah. But they'll like give him an order, and then like Topher will be like, oh, Guillermo, you know, like, I wish I could get on that order, but I'm really kind of busy, and then Guillermo would end up doing it.
Yeah.
Which comes into play later in the season, like how much they're reliant on Guillermo, you know, but in this episode, it's just kind of played as a joke, like that Topher just doesn't do anything.
Yeah. So kind of like the status quo for Guillermo doesn't change, just having Topher around. Just the only thing different is Topher like gets credit for stuff that he didn't do.
Yeah.
You know.
Topher ends up dying.
Yes.
And Laszlo and Nadia take it hard, which is really annoying to Guillermo, because he's like,
yeah, because he's
basically been doing everything.
That guy was worthless, but Laszlo and Nadia loved him. And Nadia gets this idea to hire a necromancer to revive him. And it's funny because Laszlo Laszlo like derides her for it. Laszlo calls necromancers like scam artists.
They're shysters that,
They're shysters, yeah. He's against it, but Naja insists on it. And they find this necromancer, Wallace the Necromancer. And he was played by...
It's Benedict Wong from
yes,
Doctor Strange.
Yes.
And the worst episode of Black Mirror. But yeah, so Benedict Wong plays Wallace the Necromancer, and he is a total shyster. He is the paranormal world's equivalent of like a free-to-play game. He's like constantly tacking on additional charges, doing his job very lazily. Like as he's resurrecting Topher, at one point you see him like using his phone, like only half paying attention, and they just kind of keep playing on the idea that he's just kind of incompetent and doesn't care. And so we get Wallace back, but we get Topher back, but he's clearly like a zombie.
Yeah. He resurrects him as a zombie, so he's like constantly like going after Guillermo, trying to eat Guillermo.
Yeah. And Guillermo's struggling to kind of keep him in check, and he's still getting more love than Guillermo is. But there comes a certain point which he ends up attacking as like Guillermo's like running from him. He ends up like Topher ends up attacking Nandor, who just kind of, that's the breaking point for Nandor. Like he's just like watching as he's chasing Guillermo doing nothing, but then he just kind of comes even close to him, and Nandor like immediately like kills him, except he's a zombie, so he doesn't die. And so we had like a hilarious scene of like him like standing on top of him when he's in a pond and like trying to drown him. Doing all these things if you're trying to keep him dead and not being able to keep him dead. And they just basically end up taking him back to the Necromancer, complaining about the fact that he's broken and irreparably and not working. And the Necromancer solution is that he gives them license plate
he gives them like novelty license plates. Yeah.
And they can't even really find their own names. That's like the funniest part.
That's the funniest part. Yeah. He's like, well, I don't do refunds, but I do have something for you.
So they get these novelty license plates with like names that don't even match them. And then you see that he puts Topher in like basically like a sweatshop full of zombies.
Yeah. So the funniest thing about the episode is that like Laszlo was right and that the Necromancer was a shyster.
And he brought them back, charged them, and then took him back on credit as like a zombie slave to make more license plates.
Yeah.
So that was the first episode. The first episode actually aired back to back with the second episode when the season started.
Oh, did it?
Like I watched the first two like right away. The second episode is titled Ghosts, and it featured the return of Jeff/Gregor. Basically, there had been like something kind of haunting their house, but what was hilarious about this episode right from the get-go.
They don't believe in ghosts.
Yeah, they don't believe in ghosts. They just visited a necromancer and revived one of their assistants who became a zombie. They are vampires. They fought against werewolves. They don't believe in ghosts. Oh. And not only do they not believe in them, but they just kind of like laugh at the idea of it. Like,
it's hilarious too because like they don't believe in ghosts. We know Laszlo doesn't believe in curses.
Yeah.
Even though, like, they're clearly real. But yeah, like, they don't believe in ghosts, but Naja does. Because Naja is superstitious.
Yeah.
So she believes in everything. Unconditionally. Like, she believes in witches. Like, there's funny, like, I think from another episode where she's, like, blames everything on being a witch's curse.
Yeah. Stubs her toe. She's like, witches!
Yeah, witches. But, like, so she believes in the ghost. And so basically, she insists on having a seance to contact the ghost.
Mm-hmm. This ends up revealing, it makes them visible, and we find out that the ghost is Jeff/Gregor.
Yes.
Her human lover who Laszlo has been killing in basically every lifetime.
Yeah, every lifetime Laszlo kills him. So and we found out from season 1, he is basically he is her lover who every time he is reincarnated, he finds his way to her again.
Uh-huh.
And
then he gets gets beheaded.
And then he gets beheaded. And now he's a ghost. And now that, like, she could see him, like, he starts going after Naja again, you know, trying to continue that. And then it gets crazier because then the vampires, like, start to wonder, like, if they're dead, do they have ghosts?
And they do.
It turns out they do.
There are ghost versions of the vampires, and like Nandor can't communicate with his own ghost because his ghost doesn't speak English and he's forgotten his original language.
Yeah, he's forgotten his original language that he spoke, so
Laszlo's ghost is basically exactly like Laszlo. He's just, his regret that kept him from moving on is that he didn't finish a wang.
Yeah, exactly. that he was killed by Naja before he could, you know, relieve himself.
Yeah.
And so basically, that's the funniest thing because like, they have to try and get like their spirits to move on. And so like for, you know, like, for Nandor, it's like trying to understand what his spirit wants and what his spirit needs to move on. And for Laszlo, it's like, he already knows off the bat, but it's like, he's going to have to relieve his spirit.
Of his ectoplasm, to use a euphemism.
Yes. And then Naja and her spirit, they become best friends.
So this actually carries on throughout the rest of the season and going on apparently, but Naja's spirit ends up inhabiting a doll.
Yeah, because Naja is like, I don't want my spirit to move on. I want to just like hang out with my spirit all the time. And so they come to an idea that her spirit's just going to inhabit this doll and then she's just going to be around now. She's not moving on.
And Nandor, his spirit, and he just wants his horse.
Yeah.
So they summon his horse spirit and then they move on together.
But
then there's one like little funny joke through the whole episode. Colin Robinson is trying to do the "What's up, dog" joke.
Oh yeah. He keeps going like "up, dog," and like everybody's just like ignoring him. You know, like nobody's taking the bait. You know, so he keeps trying. He keeps going. Yeah, but did you hear about "up, dog"? and you know, like Nandor just like giving like a disapproving look. You know, like nobody's taking the bait.
So finally, with all the seances going on, he ends up summoning his dead grandmother.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, it's his grandmother. What's he gonna say? And he says, have you heard about Up Dog?
He goes, no, what up, dog? And he goes, nothing much. How about you? And then he's like, and that was it.
Yeah, he was so excited to do that.
That was it. Then he was done with her. And he's like, oh, you know, I haven't seen you in a long time. He's like, yep, bye. He just wanted to do that joke.
And moving on, the next episode is called Brain Scramble, and
Yes.
this had kind of two main plot lines. One of the plot lines involved the main residents going to their neighbor's house for what they believe is a superb owl party.
Yes. It was hilarious, like, listening to, like, Naja, like, explain it, because she's like, apparently they have this superb owl that's the greatest owl in the land.
And they revere owls because, like owls, they are predators of the night.
Yes, yeah, we revere owls because, like us, they are predators of the night. And we have been invited to see this superb owl. And of course the joke is like it's really Super Bowl.
Yeah. Super Bowl party, and they just kind of got the space wrong.
Yeah.
So while they're going to their neighbor's house, they know that their neighbors are humans, so they tell Guillermo, we need you to get us some virgins because we need some blood, because we can't eat the human food, obviously. Which is, it's always funny whenever you see the vampires on this show eat human food, and then they just like projectile vomit.
Oh yeah.
Like uncontrollably.
Yeah, uncontrollably.
They had the bear in last season where he was literally getting like launched into the air by his own.
He was by his own, but he was doing it on purpose because he loved it. Also, he was high as fuck, so at that point.
Yeah. Cause he like ate a hippie or something, I think. I can't remember, but it was something funny. But anyways, that was last season. So the Super Bowl party had the two storylines in it. It had Guillermo trying to secure some virgins.
Right.
And then it had the actual Superb Owl party.
The Superb Owl party was like the self-contained this episode, but like the stuff with Guillermo is like
it's tied into his plot since last season.
It's kind of tied into his plot from last, that's continuing through this season. It's part of his character development.
It's kind of the one plot that really carries through from last season through this season. Well, two that kind of intersect. It's this one and the Vampire Council having put an execution order on their head. Those are like the two plot lines that carry through this season.
Yes.
So, at the Superb Owl party, there's basically a few things going on. One is that they end up, Laszlo and Nandor end up being overheard by their neighbor talking about vampire stuff. He doesn't believe them. He thinks they're joking, but they take it way too seriously. And so they like double hypnotize him and it just fucks him up.
Yes.
So now he's just all screwed up and doesn't remember anything.
Because they're like double hypnotism. Yeah, that's better than single hypnotism.
Yeah. They go way too far. And then while that's happening, Nadja ends up like hanging out with the wives, which she's confused by. She thinks that they're all Sean's wives. Their neighbor Sean. But it's just different wives.
And she finds out like the old woman, like the grandma in the house is like a woman that she used to visit and play with when that woman was a child.
Yeah.
And then she finds out that woman has like a necklace or a pendant that is very important to Nadja. And so she basically, as soon as she finds that out, she basically starts tearing the place apart looking for it.
Yeah.
And that's all she cares about at that point.
And just talking a bunch of trash to this old grandmother.
Yeah, to this old grandmother. Yeah. It's hilarious.
So, I mean, there's kind of a happy ending to this storyline as far as it goes with, Sean and his wife, cause it's revealed through the thing that they're like, kind of have a marriage is kind of on the rocks, but by kind of erasing his history, he kind of sees his wife for the first time again and is all excited to be with her.
Well, it's kind of funny too, because in that moment, like, they're just getting ready to kill him.
Yeah.
You know, cause they decided since they fucked him up so bad that they have no recourse but to kill him.
Yeah.
And so they're trying to get around to do it, and then that's when he sees his wife, and then that happens.
And then we have Guillermo's story in this episode, which involved him. He was looking for virgins, so he was looking up groups, and he saw a group that was meeting that night called the Mosquito Collectors of the Tri-State Area.
Yes.
And he was like, oh, well, they gotta be virgins.
He's like, oh yeah. He's like, this is perfect.
So he goes to infiltrate that group to find some virgins to bring back, and then quickly discovers that it's actually a group of vampire hunters that have never hunted a vampire before, but are like keen to do so. And they're using mosquitoes as like a code word for like bloodsuckers, you know?
Yeah.
And so first off, I mean, right, notably you have, Claude, the leader of this group, is played by Craig Robinson, who's from The Office and a bunch
obviously
of stuff. Hot Tub Time Machine, a bunch of stuff. So he's hilarious. And as Guillermo's trying to keep his cover, he's like really funny. Like there's always this tension that like where you feel like, you know, oh, they're onto him. And then you realize they're not. They have no idea that he's who he is or what's going on with him. But then what's even like nerve-wracking for Guillermo is that one of the people that stands up in the group is Shanice, and she starts mentioning Jenna, her roommate in college, and that's Jenna from the first season, the vampire that was turned by Nadja. So there's like a connection right there that you kind of get like, oh shit, it's like this is now related to the group, you know, this is like direct relation to his group now, not just vampires in general, but the people he serves. And so he kind of is staying in this group and is accidentally, as is always the case with all his vampire hunter stuff, like just exceeding like incredibly well at all their like training exercises. So they're all kind of admiring him, and he's just trying to get out of there. And that's kind of his story. Like that's just kind of set up in this episode. So let's move on to the next episode, is The Curse. And this episode, again, has two storylines. Again, it has Guillermo's storyline and the other vampire storyline. Guillermo is now staying kind of with this group of vampire hunters because he's like, he realizes that because of, because of Shanice, Jenna's roommate, that at any moment they could come across his bosses, his vampires, and that would be very bad. So he's like kind of like staying close to them to kind of keep an eye on that. And that ends up being the case, in which as he gets told that there's actually a family of a house with like a number of vampires in it in Staten Island and stuff, and he's like, oh shit. And he's all, in this neighborhood, he's like, oh shit. It's like his neighborhood. So he's like now convinced that they're going to be basically going to try to raid his house to kill vampires. So he's kind of sticking along with them. Meanwhile, while that storyline's happening, Nandor is trying to catch up on his emails, and he ends up getting a chain letter.
Oh god, this is brilliant.
And he just goes into a panic that he's going to be cursed.
They mentioned like he got a chain letter. If he doesn't send it to 10 people, he will be visited by Bloody Mary. and he's like, and
so he's like freaked out. He thinks that he's gonna have this curse placed on him, and he's gonna be killed. And he shows Laszlo, and him and Laszlo are trying to brainstorm. And the more they get invested in it, the worse thing. He's all like, as they're checking the email, like they get like a section where it says like mailer demon, which is like anybody who uses email has seen that, and they're like, demon.
He's like, demon. Oh my god. And so they're freaking out about this, and to the point where like they're trying to find random email addresses to like forward this to so that they can get rid of the curse.
But they can't even come up with 10 people.
No, they can't. They can't come up with 2. Then they go and they ask Colin Robinson,
They're trying to trick him into it, actually, I think.
They're trying to trick him into it, but Colin Robinson, since like he knows about this shit, he's not ignorant to like the internet or email like they are. He's just like, he's like, I could forward this to some people at work. But he's like, yeah, but then
the annoyance that it would cause them at work would be like allow them to feed on them.
Yeah, exactly. That's what he's thinking.
So he kind of takes care of the problem for them, but now they kind of like owe him. He's kind of like holding it over their heads at the same time. So he's like killing 2 birds with 1 stone.
Yeah, he's killing 2 birds with 1 stone. But what's really funny is like at one point, Guillermo is with this group and they're headed to the house, and Guillermo is like so worried. Like he tries to phone Nandor like ahead of time to warn him, and it's so hilarious because like he's whispering too, so nobody hears him in the van. And Nandor is like, the phone's ringing, and they pick up the phone and he's like, you get out, they're coming to kill you, get out. Nandor like slams the phone down. He's like, the curse is coming through over the phone. The curse is coming through the phone.
So yeah, that takes us back to Guillermo's story. He's scared to death that he's gonna end up at his house and they're gonna kill him. That's what he thinks is gonna happen.
Yeah.
And he's trying to figure out what he's gonna do, how he's gonna stop them. He's trying to talk them down and make them go like, oh, it's kind of scary to do this. Maybe we shouldn't do this. He's trying to talk them all down, everybody in this group. But they end up getting out and they go to a house and it's a completely different house. And so initially he's kind of like relieved, but then as they're going in, then he starts going like, oh shit, we're just gonna be breaking into some random people's house and they're gonna kill these random people. But it turns out it is a house of vampires. It just isn't the right house of vampires. It's a house of vampires that, I wrote down here in the show notes, and I've seen it discussed before as disco vampires. It's basically vampires from the 70s that look like they've just been sleeping since the 70s. And the house is like full of them. And so as they're attacking, they're obviously in like way over their heads. And so like, one of them ends up getting killed, Derek, and the rest of them escape, but they're all like traumatized. They had no idea what they were getting into, but that ends up kind of working out for Guillermo because they're kind of done,
Yeah.
That's that episode. But that was funny.
Yeah, because
the disco vampires were crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy and it was scary. And it's one of the moments too, like, this show rarely gets scary, but that was one of the moments where it did get scary. Because like, yeah, the whole like disco, like, vampires is funny, but then like, you go there, like, it's an entire nest of vampires. Like, and they're like brutally killing these people, like, it's pretty brutal. brutal. And we got to see some awesome, vampire killing skills from Guillermo, like in this episode. It was just a really cool sequence, I thought. Like one of the best moments in the season, in my opinion.
My favorite part of the whole episode was, and they do this a few times throughout the show, where they kind of remind us that there's a camera crew following them.
Yes.
That's like the conceit of the show. And in this episode, there was a part where the vampire hunters, in quotation marks, ran out of the room with the vampires, and the camera's still in there, and all the vampires turn and look at the camera.
Well, it was the scene where Guillermo, after killing some of the vampires, and basically as they're descending on him, he flips them off and he jumps out the window. And then right after Guillermo jumps out the window, they all turn to look at the cameraman.
And you can just see the cameraman panicking as he rushes to get out of there.
Yeah.
It was just really funny because it's you forget that the whole setup is an office setup with confessional cameras and a documentary crew. That whole conceit of it, you just kind of forget about it every so often because so much of the stuff that's going on is so ridiculous that it doesn't make sense with that conceit. And then they remind you of it, and whenever they remind you of it, it's hilarious. And so that was probably my favorite reminder of that conceit. So that was the curse. The next episode is Colin's promotion, and this kind of stuck with mostly the main cast and then just, Colin's workmates. Basically, Colin Robinson, the energy vampire, gets a promotion. He's not expecting it. He thinks he's going to get fired from his job. He ends up getting a promotion and being in a position of power, being able to not just use, annoyance and boredom, but also authority and fear over his employees and having that kind of control over him. He just starts becoming inordinately powerful. His hair grows back. He's floating through the air, swimming in the air. He's just incredibly powerful, and it's just completely going to his head. He's just completely out of control. And then in the house, Nandor and everybody else, they're basically just almost in a comatose state. They don't have energy to do anything because Colin's just draining them constantly whenever he's there. And Colin's so good at draining that as he's walking to the office, he'll just point at somebody and they'll just drop to the floor. Just completely spent of all energy. And so he's gotten so powerful, he even splits into 3 different Collins, which is really funny because one of them insists on calling himself the Seaman. And the main Colin is don't say that, don't say that. He's why? It's badass. I'm the Seaman. And he's don't say Seaman. Don't call us Seaman. But so Colin becomes the threat in this episode because he's just, they can't do anything against him. But he ends up just draining himself. He split into 3 people and then they drained themselves to the point that it looked like they were basically all dead. And they went and ended up burying them all in the backyard, except that the main Colin Robinson woke up and came back, and he just wanted to be appreciated. He was actually kind of faking dead for a while. And he was oh yeah, they're all okay. And then he realized, oh no, the other versions of him were actually dead. They were drained. And so that was Colin's promotion.
Oh my god, that freaking episode. Yeah, that was hilarious.
On to what I think was probably the best episode of the season, in my opinion, On the Run. And so this episode started with a major guest appearance. Mark Hamill shows up at the vampire's house. He's playing Jim the Vampire, and he is saying that Laszlo stayed at his house, rented a room from him, and never paid. He skimped and ran out on it. And this is I don't know, in the 1800s or something. And so all this time, Jim the Vampire has been trying to track him down and swearing vengeance. He said, "You pay me back what you owe, or face me in combat." And Laszlo refuses to do that, and he ends up acting like he's going to face him in combat, and then runs away.
Yes.
And then basically the whole episode is following him.
He becomes Jackie Daytona. and it's hilarious too because his disguise is a toothpick, and apparently that works. Apparently nobody, including the vampire that's been hunting him down, recognizes him with that stupid toothpick.
Yeah. Just completely doesn't recognize him with the toothpick in his mouth. Yeah.
And yeah, Mark Hamill is awesome in this episode, by the way. Just brilliant, obviously. But it's hilarious too because oh yeah, he says he went to Pennsylvania because it sounds like Transylvania, and Transylvania is cool.
Yeah. So he becomes Jackie Daytona. He takes over a bar there. He's like slowly draining people in town because it's just like the residents of the town, but he's become like a beloved fixture of the town.
He's built, and the thing is, like, the real funny thing too is, like, he actually gets himself invested in the town. He gets himself invested in the local, like, women's volleyball team.
Like hilariously so. He's like so into it.
Like to the point, like he wants to see them make state, and they don't have the money, so he starts, like, trying to, like, raise funds to get them. And, like, while he's doing this, like, the Mark Hamill, like, finds him.
But he's got the toothpick, so he doesn't recognize him?
Yeah, at first he doesn't recognize him. Like, Mark Hamill's vampire only, like, recognizes him, like, during the one scene at the end where this blanket he had covering the mirror behind him gets, like, pulled off, and all of a sudden he sees, like, he's casting no reflection, and that's what gives him away.
Yeah, and then he takes the toothpick out.
Not the fact that he looks like Laszlo, of course, but, like, that doesn't give him
But
away.
just that he's a vampire, yeah.
Yeah.
And then Laszlo, recognizing that he's been found out, takes the toothpick out of his mouth, and you see, like, Mark Hamill go, like...
Yeah, like, oh my god.
And so they end up fighting, but they come to terms because Laszlo, and they're talking about the town, and in the time that Jim the Vampire has been in town hunting him, he's actually become invested in the town as well. He's become invested in the women's volleyball team making it. Like, in a short time, it's like he's already become invested himself. And so they kind of are able to talk on that point. And Laszlo ends up saying, you know what? Here, take this. And it's like one of those Billy Bass, like, fish decorations that sings. And he shows it to him as, like, kind of refers to it as a one-of-a-kind, like, priceless artifact.
He uses that to make his debt, and, like, Mark Hamill's vampire. Jim the Vampire. Yeah, I knew it was like something. I knew it was something stupid. It's Jim the Vampire. He buys into the idea that it's a priceless item, and he's like, your debt is paid. And then at the end, it's revealed that Jim the Vampire, like, took over coaching the women's volleyball team. It shows him, and he's got that stupid Billy Bass under his arm the whole time.
Yeah.
And Laszlo returns home. But yeah, that's one of the best episodes of the season.
Yeah. That was, I think, probably my favorite episode. And it just followed Laszlo in Pennsylvania just becoming basically a part of this town, this small town.
Yes. It was just a part of the small town.
So that was On the Run. The next episode is The Return. And this one we mentioned already, the Cursed Witch's Hat episode from season 1. This is like a follow-up to that. We see the return of Simon the Devious, the vampire that wants Laszlo's hat more than anything. And he's fallen on hard times since Laszlo gave him his hat and his club instantly exploded. And he was like, Simon was kind of in horrible shape, and he's been living in the sewers ever since. There's a great joke where they finally run into him, and he's all, I'm sorry you have to see me in this horrible place. And they're all, oh, the sewer? And he's like, no, Staten Island.
Yes.
Laszlo ends up getting guilted by Nadja into them, like, inviting Simon to stay with him.
This is a continuation from a season 1 episode, the episode about the cursed hat, which, spoilers, I don't know, might show up again.
Simon the Devious is now living with them. While this is happening, Simon's, like, fellow vampires, like, end up visiting. One of them, who's kind of like a very unhuman looking one named Carol, shows up and is, like, obsessed with Guillermo, and ends up kind of, like, revealing to Guillermo that she knows that he killed a vampire, that she can, like, smell it on him or something. And he ends up, like, accidentally killing her. But then you see the rest of Simon the Devious's crew as he, finally reveals that, after all their hospitality, that he is just after Laszlo's hat. He's not put down. This is all a big plot. And he brings his leather skins crew back together, including Count Rapula and even Elvis, who was revealed in that episode to be a vampire created by Laszlo that just kind of frequently goes to their house to record. He records songs about being a vampire at Laszlo's house, and we've just never seen him. He's just, like, been hidden away there somewhere. But Elvis has betrayed Laszlo, too, and joined the side of Simon the Devious. And they have a big brawl in the sewers.
I know it's season 1 joke, but still, Count Rapula.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's The Return. The next episode was Collaboration. This one one it's got kind of two main storylines, or kind of three. One of them's kind of split. So one storyline is about Laszlo hears a song of his that he wrote, but it's like a famous song being played, and he's pissed off because he's like, people keep ripping off my music. And you find out he's got this whole catalog of songs that he's written that are like slightly different versions of like famous songs, like Kokomo, and just these old like songs that like they did vampire versions of first before they were created, and then were apparently ripped off.
Yeah, I love it because like Laszlo finds out while he's like draining this jogger, he hears that song, and I forgot what song it was now, but I guess it doesn't matter. It's
yeah.
But he hears this song, this popular song, and immediately he's like, "Jogger, what was that?" And the guy's like, "What?" It's like, "What was that music?" And then he gets upset. He's like, "Damn it, they ripped me off." He talks about like how he wrote that song in like the 1800s or some shit.
Yeah. So he ends up teaming up with Nadja, and on Colin Robinson's recommendation, Colin Robinson like books them a gig
Colin
to play
Robinson
the song.
is doing this because he knows their music is horrible and it's going to annoy and upset people, and that's going to give him energy. So
yeah, and then when they're
reason.
booed, it's going to annoy them, and then he's going to feed off them too.
Yeah.
So it's like he's just like planning like an awkward situation where he's going to be able to feed off of all parties involved.
This big energy buffet.
Yeah. The other storyline, kind of the more interesting storyline of the episode, that one was funny, but the more interesting one involved one of Nandor's old familiars, Benji, shows up. He's an old man. He'd been abandoned by Nandor, who'd like hypnotized him to forget everything. And he like led a life, got married, did this everything, and then suddenly something triggered him to remember. I think his wife had him go to therapy or something, and he remembered all the stuff that Nandor had like hypnotized him to forget. And so he went and like sought out Nandor to become his familiar again and wanted to be, and it's just a play on the whole idea of like Guillermo desperately wanting to be turned into a vampire and how long he's worked for him. And now you have this guy who's like 80 years old that's like Nandor's old familiar that like never got turned and just got abandoned instead. This causes Guillermo to get like really pissed off at Nandor, as you had mentioned earlier. Like their relationship is kind of tried to the breaking point. And while all of this is happening, he accompanies Nandor to a party with vampires, and one of the vampires there is like a former familiar that he had worked with before that got turned into a vampire. And so he's like horribly jealous of this woman that's like now a vampire. And she makes a comment about like how she's like, I turn all my familiars within this amount of time. And Guillermo wants to get involved in that. And she's like, oh, I don't poach other vampires' familiars. Like you'd have to be free and clear before I would do that. And so with this breaking point happening with Guillermo and Nandor,
yes,
he ends up going to this female vampire, and like that used to be a familiar that he had helped out and stuff.
She's saying like all this stuff that's like got Guillermo like thinking, oh, I need to like jump ship,
So Guillermo does end up jumping ship. He has a falling out with Nandor and ends up saying, well, I'm going to leave. And Nandor's like, well, fine, go. And then, of course, with Guillermo gone, like his life is just a mess because the vampires are so reliant on him that, it's very apparent. And Nandor ends up missing Guillermo a lot, but he's too proud to kind of take him back. And they have a few encounters where they run into each other, but they're both acting like everything's fine, even though Guillermo's annoyed in his situation. And
eventually, like, Nandor visits Guillermo at like this vampire's place where Guillermo is staying, and they have like a talk, but they don't come to like an agreement, and Nandor ends up like leaving, like, like upset, and then shortly after that, like they're doing all this stuff with this like lady vampire, then all of a sudden like that little kid vampire, like her master like shows up, and then it's revealed that like she wasn't a vampire at all the whole time. She was just like faking it and like tricking people into like being her familiars
because she was so fed up of the same thing Guillermo was, of not being turned, that she just wanted to.
Yeah, she just wanted to experience it.
Yeah, what it was like to be a vampire. And so she's like telling everybody to run away now, and they're all running and being hunted down basically by this little girl vampire and her other friends that are also vampires.
Yeah, it's like she's pissed, so she's like killing everybody she can, and like Guillermo's like running out of there, and then
he's running out with the cat familiar that apparently is like made the finger sandwiches and all this stuff.
Yeah,
it's like ridiculous. They had like a running joke about this cat familiar. But Guillermo's running out with the cat familiar in his arms trying to save it, and then he ends up running into like Nandor, and he's like about to beg Nandor for his position back, for his protection and everything. And Nandor's like, "No, let me stop you," and goes through the whole thing of like apologizing himself. So Guillermo kind of sits there like nervously, like as Nandor keeps talking, want to just kind of get on with it, like yeah. But at the same time, he's getting kind of what he wants out of it. He ends up getting like a day off every week, and he gets better treatment out of the deal.
He asks for like a day off like every week, and Andor is like, "What? that's ridiculous." But yeah, Andor like agrees to it. And it's funny because I think of like the next episode, it literally like takes place on like Guillermo's day off that he negotiated.
Yeah. That next episode, which is called Witches.
Yes. And so basically what's happening is like, they get abducted by a coven of witches.
Like one by one, they hear a voice saying like, the trial will begin or something, and they see a goat.
Yes.
And then they approach the goat, and then they get like levitated away.
Yeah, they get levitated away.
And it happens to him basically like one by one, all of them, it happens to him. Guillermo gets sucked in even though he doesn't want it. He keeps going like, "Oh, it's my day off, too bad," or something. But ends up, it gets so dicey that like, he's like, "Yeah, I guess I just have to be involved."
Yeah, he just has to be involved. It's funny because like, Nandor and Laszlo get sucked off, gets shuttled off to the ceremony while like, Nadja, Guillermo, and Colin Robinson get put into like this room.
It's just made of doors.
Just made of doors that there's like supposed to be no escape from, because each door leads to like some kind of dead end or some horrible thing.
Yeah, it's all just like hellscape of different dimensions of evil or something. Every time they open a door, it's just something else. And the one, like, it's funny that, like, as they're there, Colin Robinson keeps trying to, like, he's like, "Oh, figure out this riddle," and stuff like that. He's so invested in, like,
Colin Robinson,
how smart he is.
Yeah, he's so invested. Yeah, he's like, "I'll figure this out." And Colin Robinson, he's, like, bragging about, like how he's an expert at escape rooms and stuff. and so what's funny is, like, Guillermo, because he can speak Spanish, like, he can read the Spanish over one of the doors, so he figures it out and gets them out of there. But Colin Robinson, like he keeps taking credit for it. He's like, they walk into there and Colin Robinson was like, "Yes, I figured out your escape room." And like, Guillermo's like, "No, I did. I was the one who read the Spanish." And Colin Robinson's like, "Nope, I definitely figured it out. It was me."
Find out that the witches are holding the vampires hostage because they want their semen.
Yes, because they want to use the vampire semen
as like a beauty cream to keep them young.
To keep them young forever, because apparently like it lasts longer than human semen.
Yeah.
And so that's what they want it for. The whole thing is hilarious too, because like they're doing a ceremony and like they're like, "Oh, we want to extract your semen," and Laszlo's like, "Yeah, like this actually isn't so bad," and then they reveal themselves to be like super old, and even then Laszlo's like, "Well, that's different, but not wholly unappealing."
You find out that the head of the witches is a witch named Lilith who has a history with Nadja.
Yeah, who has and he has a history with Nadja because like Lilith previously like Laszlo cheated on Nadja with her previously.
But we find out that it's because she disguised herself as Nadja, but it's like a Nadja that doesn't actually look like Nadja.
Yeah. She shows like how she disguised herself because like Laszlo's like, "Well, she disguised herself as you. I had no idea it wasn't you." And like Nadja says, "Show me." And she changes into her Nadja disguise. And yeah, it doesn't look anything like her. And Nadja's like, "That doesn't look anything at all like me." And he's like, "Laszlo, does that look like me?" And Laszlo's like, "Looks like you to me."
he's like, "I don't know which one is speaking to me now."
I don't know. And she's like, do you think anybody with long dark hair and a European accent is me? Like, do you think Nandor looks like me? And like, he looks like Nandor. He's like, "Oh shit." She said something like, would you sleep with Nandor? And like, he says something like he actually did.
They hint that they actually had, at some point. And, Guillermo ends up resolving the situation by basically finding out that, like, instead of this whole ridiculous ritual and abducting them against their will, that Guillermo would just promise to get a certain amount of semen to them as like a business, opportunity, like every so often, and they would just pay for it and they wouldn't have to go through this whole situation.
Right.
So he kind of resolves the situation, and he's kind of exerting power in doing so. I think it's also great that, they kept going back to Black Peter the goat. He just kind of would be around, and like, he's like, do you think they'll ever make me a witch, And it's like the same situation.
Because like at the end, Guillermo's leaving and he goes to meet up with Peter the ghost, and it's the same situation. They say like, Peter the goat, like, witch is familiar, Yeah. And he's like, you ever think they'll make me a witch? And Guillermo's like, I don't know. It's like, I'll catch you later. And he's like, yeah, later.
It's also funny because Black Peter the goat was voiced by James Frain, who played a vampire in True Blood. So it's kind of in the tradition of like, all these vampire actors that have kind of showed up on this series. Yeah. Most of which showed up in a single episode last season. But in general, it's always funny whenever you have like a cameo like that,
Yeah.
That brings us to our last episode, Nouveau Theater de Vampires. And this begins with our group of vampires getting an invitation to a theater group. They get this, Guillermo is just kind of like disappeared away from them. We realize that it's because he's conflicted about his position as like a Van Helsing and as a vampire's familiar, and like the conflicts of those two worlds. That he's so good at killing vampires, but he serves vampires, so he went home.
He went home to live with his mother again.
Yeah, and try to move on from it all. And so he's not having a great life at home, but he's doing it for a reason, He's conflicted about it, so he's trying to separate himself from that world entirely. And while that happens, the other vampires get this invitation. It's funny too, because like we really get a sense of how things are, like if Guillermo's not around, like they literally have dead bodies just lying all over the place. Yeah, just everywhere.
And just like pools of blood, like Colin Robinson like literally like slips in a big pool of blood and gets blood all over himself. And
he's like, well, he can change, and he's like, I'll just tell him I got mugged or something. Like, I can't remember what it was, but like,
I'll just say,
he's just be lazy and just explain away the blood rather than the chain.
And of course, like, they're not wearing their good clothes, like Nandor's wearing like...
He's wearing a Dream Team basketball jersey.
Yes, a Dream Team basketball jersey.
It's just really funny. Yeah, they're all like in a horrible condition without Guillermo there, realizing how much Guillermo does for them. But then they get this invitation to this theater company of vampires that they're so excited for. It's very super exclusive among vampires. It's this big deal. It's a theater company made up entirely of vampires. It's a clear parody of, if you've seen Interview with the Vampire, like Antonio Banderas' character in that.
Oh yeah,
which they referenced was like the head of a group like that.
Yeah,
a vampire theater group. Except this group performs solely for vampires, whereas that group performed for humans and then fed on them.
In Interview with Vampires, a front for vampires to feed on humans, whereas this is supposed to be an event only for vampires. But yeah, I recognize that from Interview with the Vampire, like as soon as I saw it.
Yeah.
But it turns out like for some reason, like Guillermo decides to come back and check on them, and he finds the invitation, and he sees like the vampiric council logo on the invitation, and he's like they didn't go to that, like that's obvious. You're right. Like,
and then like the Nadja's doll with that we'd seen in a previous episode that has Nadja's ghost in it starts talking to him, and she's like, oh yeah, they went. They were very excited.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like they totally fell for it. And so what happens is like at the theater, they get restrained with like a silver rope,
Mm-hmm.
and
Vladimir ends up revealing himself that's Jermaine Clement's character from the original movie of the same name, but he was also in the Vampire Council episode.
Yes,
and the theater production
is the head of the Vampire Council.
And the theater production, the whole thing is like a reenactment of their supposed crimes that they need to
which is hilarious.
For. Yeah,
because
it's a funny recap.
Because basically, like they're blaming them for like all the vampire kills Guillermo made for the last 2 seasons.
Yeah, Nandor tries to shift it to Guillermo. Says it was my familiar Guillermo that did those, and they're like, "Oh, you mean like this Guillermo?" And they had like this bumbling like.
Yeah, he's basically like just saying, "Oh yeah, Guillermo." He's like, "Of course, blame the familiar. We've all been there, right?" But then he shows up, but like he's making the point that like Guillermo is just a human. Like, how could a human like kill all these vampires? I mean,
yeah, one of the vampire actors is dressed like him and just bumbling around on the stage and like completely incompetent. And then, that's basically, I mean, Guillermo shows up.
And then that's where Guillermo makes his entrance and he starts killing all the vampires in the room.
Yeah, and it's just kind of ends up being revealed to everybody that he actually is a vampire hunter, that he's done this, Of course, like our idiot protagonist leads don't even understand it. Like, it's just like when they watch the whole thing happen and they just kind of take it.
They watch the whole thing happen and then like, I think.
And they're like, where have you been all this time? We have dirty laundry.
Yeah. Like he does that in front of them and like the only thing is like Nandor is concerned about the laundry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're completely oblivious to it. We should state that there was an earlier scene we'd mentioned in the episode where Simon the Devious was there and he had killed that vampire Carol that recognized him as a vampire killer.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
In that episode, there was a scene where Guillermo and Nandor came to an understanding that he had killed her.
Yes.
That Guillermo had killed her. And then they had kind of like a weird look between them, but it never really went anywhere. We just kind of had the fake vampire blow up thing. It was kind of a continuation of that. But it was this kind of weird moment. It's almost as if, Nandor and everybody can't accept the idea that a mere familiar, that mere Guillermo could actually be anything like this. So they're just like in a heightened sense of denial.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it seems like.
Yeah. So from this episode, like all these vampires end up dying. Vladimir apparently escaped.
But it literally ends on that. Like all these vampires are dead and Nandor like chides him about the laundry, and then the episode ends and the season ends.
Yeah. See, I thought it was a kind of weak ending compared to season 1. A lot of it was a recap. It was a pretty funny recap, but it was still a recap.
Yeah, I can see where I can see.
And it's kind of like the ending.
I just thought it was kind of like spectacular in the way where Guillermo came in and like he starts like killing all these vampires, like the big spectacle of that. I just thought was cool.
Yeah, but it wasn't like, when I look back on it, there weren't a lot of really funny, memorable moments.
No, I think the funniest part was like Colin Robinson slipping in the in the blood.
And being too lazy to change out of it. Yeah.
Also the one where Laszlo's draining this guy and then he tells him to go home and the guy's just like, wait, you're not gonna like drain my blood until I'm dead? Laszlo's like, not this time, Because because like Laszlo doesn't want to like deal with like another dead body laying around that like nobody's gonna take care of.
Yeah. So that's pretty much it. That's it for the end of the season. The one big piece of news that came out after the season concluded was that Jermaine Clement, who is the showrunner for the series, who played Vladimir in this, was in the original movie, was one of the co-creators of the movie, and ended up running the series, is leaving the show before season 3. So there's a big debate you could go into over whether that means that he's leaving because he's comfortable with where he left it, or he's leaving because he's sick of working on the show, or because there was some problem that we don't know about behind the scenes that caused him to leave. But it gives a big uncertainty to where the show's going to be when it comes back. Obviously, Taika Waititi's not going to take over. He's way too busy. He's got like a ton of film projects he's already committed to. So he's not going to come back and take over for Jermaine Clement,
No.
He's the other creator of the series, So it's going going to be somebody else who wasn't involved from the beginning taking over. Somebody else probably who was already in the writer's room. And it all just is like, how are they going to take over? What are the circumstances of them taking over? And is this going to end up being a continuation of what we've had, or is it going to be like a big downhill slope? Because we've seen it kind of both ways, but usually it's not a great sign when a showrunner leaves.
Yeah. Well, be optimistic. Don't be a pessimist. Here's the thing. Season 3 doesn't exist yet, so we don't know. It'll be bad when it's bad.
The thing is, he wasn't fired. He didn't seem to go out with any sort of animosity, at least nothing that was expressed.
Maybe he just feels like, he wants to move on to other projects, which is
and
perfectly
maybe
natural.
Yeah, and maybe it's in safe hands and he feels confident in leaving it,
Yeah, exactly.
That's the hope. We don't know. There's nobody who knows really either way except for people that are directly involved in the project, and none of them are speaking about it. There's nobody coming out and talking trash about anybody. Nobody's saying like, oh, I got fired. Nobody complaining about interference. There's nothing like that. So there's no sign as to how this is going to be. So hopefully this ends up, continuing as a great, funny show. We have no reason to think it won't and no reason to think it will. It's just kind of like in the middle. I think, to me, part of why I didn't like the season finale as much might, in retrospect, be connected to that, and just kind of the uncertain ending combined of the actual season with him leaving kind of left me in a place of like, oh, what's this mean? Like, where is this going now? It kind of left at a very uncertain point, So I'm kind of like, I think that might have affected how I took that last episode. But like I said, we don't know. We don't know if it's going to be a good thing, a bad thing, or an equal thing. We have no idea what this means for the show until we see season 3 or hear some, fucked up story comes out or something. That's like the only way we'll know. But yeah, so that's What We Do in the Shadows season 2. It's still a funny show. Like I said, I had a few issues with the way it began, few issues with the way it ended. Even still, while it was on, it was the funniest show airing, It was my go-to show on TV, period, while it was on TV. So, so that'll tell you something right there. It's still a great show, regardless of any issues I expressed. It's still something that I very much enjoyed watching.
Definitely.
And I'm sure, when it comes back, we'll talk about it again. We'll talk about season 3.
I don't see why we wouldn't.
Yeah. Until then, though, all we have left to do is talk about what's coming up in the next couple of weeks. On Thursday, June 25th, it is June 24th, by the way, is when we're recording this. But on Thursday, June 25th, Adventure Time Distant Lands VMO. It's an hour-long special on HBO Max based on the Adventure Time cartoon is going to come out. Doom Patrol Season 2 is also going to hit HBO Max as well as DC Universe. It's going to be on both services. Search Party is going to have its next season on HBO Max. And CBS All Access is going to bring up season 2 of the Twilight Zone reboot. Then on Friday, June 26th, Living to Love comes to Netflix. On Saturday, June 27th, Dark returns to Netflix for its 3rd season. On Sunday, June 28th, Black Monday returns to Showtime. On Tuesday, June 30th, BNA comes to Netflix. On Thursday, July 2nd, Warrior Nun comes to Netflix. It's a new series. And The Family Business comes to BET+. On Friday, July 3rd, Hannah returns for its 2nd season on Amazon Prime. The Babysitters Club, I believe, debuts on Netflix. You excited for that one?
No.
My sister used to have all of those books when she was like a little kid.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I remember she sold them at a garage sale and it was like a box full. Damn. It was like a huge box full of those books. But yeah. Now she looks back on it with like horrendous embarrassment. But
yeah, she was
a little kid, yeah. Also on that day, Cable Girls returns to Netflix. Ju-On Origins, that's Ju-On the Grudge, if you've seen those movies. It's gonna have a TV show origin story that comes to Netflix then. And although this isn't a TV show, I just thought it was kind of big enough to mention, Hamilton is coming to Disney+. So they recorded the musical with the entire original cast, including the show's creator, all in one show, and they're going to be streaming that performance on Disney Plus starting on July 3rd. So if you've missed out on the massive musical that was always sold out, well, now you can watch a live recording of it. Well, not live recording. It was recorded live, but it's not actually, it was recorded a while ago. But that's coming to Disney Plus, so you can check that out for the 4th of July weekend. So that's it. Next week, we're going to be talking about The Plot Against America. It's the HBO series. It's kind of a parallel, alternate history story in which Charles Lindbergh runs for office and is a very like Trump-esque candidate. And so it's got parallels to kind of like the modern divisions in our world, but it's like World War II era happening. So we're going to be talking about that next week. Until then, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Tyson Gifford. You can follow Will. He is at Voxel Hero. You can check out our Facebook page and our YouTube channel, as well as our site, thetotalscreen.com. You can subscribe to the podcast through any major podcast client like iTunes or Pocket Cast, and the entire backlog of our podcast is available on our YouTube channel. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Good night.
Good night.
If you would like to reach out to us and make a comment, send an email to contact@thetotalscreen.com. Stay tuned to The Total Screen for the very best in genre